new railroad crossing safety projects in South Orange County. And as the chairman mentioned, you all have the information on this in your packets. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Caskey? Please use raise hands. And I am not seeing any questions. So do we have a motion for approval?
This is Shad Smith. I'll move to approve.
Motion from Shad.
Margraf, second.
And I am not seeing any questions. Thank you. So do we have a motion for approval? And we are getting an echo on the line.
This is Shad Smith. I'll move to approve.
Motion from Shad.
Margraf, second.
And I am not seeing any questions. Thank you. So do we have a motion for approval? And we are getting an echo on the line.
This is Shad Smith. I'll move to approve.
Motion from Shad.
Margraf, second.
I am not seeing any questions. Thank you. So do we have a motion for approval? And we are getting an echo on the line.
This is Shad Smith. I'll move to approve.
If y'all bear with me for a minute, if we get that echo off.
Second.
Thank you. So do we have a motion for approval? And we are getting an echo on the line.
This is Shad Smith. I'll move to approve.
If y'all bear with me. Okay, it's at least silencing down enough. Can we go ahead and take the vote on the motion? So all in favor, please make sure that your mics are unmuted. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. It's at least silencing down enough.
Aye.
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 And do we have any opposed? Not hearing any. Motion passes. Our third item is the proposed 2021. Sorry, did I skip an item here, Eric Hill?
No, we
No,
have
okay.
we have the meeting,
Okay, thank
meeting
you.
scheduled for next year.
Yeah, the echo kind of threw my place here. So our third item is the proposed 2021 board committee meeting schedule that is found in tab 3 of the agenda. Mr. Hill will present the information, so please hold your question on this action item until the presentation is finished. Mr. Hill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, you'll see in tab 3, you'll see our meeting schedule for next year, 2021. And it is pretty, straightforward. The only question or concern that comes up each year is that May meeting, which is close to the holiday, that 3-day weekend that typically comes up. And, every year it seems like we have a question on that, but the way that we've always addressed it is, if there are items that we have to take action on, if there's business that we have to take on at that time, and it's time sensitive, that we go ahead with the meeting. And then the meeting prior to that is always an opportunity for us to look at it and look at the upcoming meeting and say, do we need to meet or not? So with that, Mr. Chairman, it's now up to you to go ahead and move this forward. So that's all that I have really to present on it.
Do we have any comments or questions from the committee?
This is Shad Smith. Why can't we move the 28th meeting to the previous week, the 21st? Is there a reason why they can't move it? I thought we've done that in the past.
That's correct, Shad. And if that's the desire of the committee, then we can go ahead and propose that.
Did we do that this year? I believe we did.
I think we did. And again, if that's the committee's will, then that's why we're having this discussion on it. So it's up to you. I believe we can either take action on that now, or we can wait until we get closer or move through the year and make that decision.
Thoughts or comments from the committee?
Well, I would think it would be better, this is Shad again, to do it now, because then it's on the schedule and everybody knows it. Doesn't surprise anybody. So I would move to approve the calendar as presented, except for modification from the May 28th meeting to May 21st.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it. Butch Margraf.
Thank you, Butch. So first, second, any discussion on the motion itself? So we'll go ahead and take our vote. Please unmute your microphones. So we have first and second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. And not hearing any, motion passes with the amendment. We have one presentation on today's agenda. Please use raise hands function to be recognized if you want to ask a question. You may raise your hand anytime during the presentation to indicate that you would like to ask a question, but we will hold questions until the presentation ends. If you have any audio issues, please use the chat box and the moderator will relay your question. So our presentation is an update on the I-4 Regional TSMO program by Mr. Hill. Eric, you're recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. For the last few years, staff has been working with the MPOs in Central Florida and looking at their TSMO programs and sharing some information with these MPOs. The background, the genesis of all this is that over the last 10 years, we at MetroPlan Orlando have certainly built a robust TSMO program. The fact that we have a structured committee, our chair sits at the board's table. We allocate funds to TSMO. We have a very vibrant group. And it's been recognized nationally because I work with a lot of peers that are doing the same kind of work around the country, and I always have an opportunity to share with them, the success that we have achieved in our TSMO program. So to look across the state and certainly look across the I-4 corridor at the other MPOs and what they're doing, it seemed like a natural opportunity for us to start to share some of our information and knowledge with them. And then also it also stems from two things, and I'll get into that. One is a few years ago, I was invited to participate in a workshop in District 1. And the workshop was for the MPO liaisons as well as the planners. And I spoke about our TSMO program. And the MPO, a couple of the MPOs in District 1 were impressed and they were interested in what we were doing. And so again, that helped, develop this opportunity of sharing information with these other MPOs. But just a little bit more background on how all this started and where it's going right now. It's now titled, or the presentation is titled I-4 Regional TSMO Program. But as I go through the presentation, you'll see that brand has started to evolve. And I think that's a positive thing. Next slide. So back around 2017, I had came up with this concept of just developing some type of coalition across I-4 that would just look at TSMO and how we can develop TSMO opportunities and strategies. And the concept was a proposal I wanted to submit to the Transportation Planning Capacity Building Program. And this is a federal program, and it's about building capacity in certain areas. And my concept at that time was to invite representatives from other corridor coalitions around the country. The I-95 corridor coalition goes from Maine to Florida, the I-95 corridor, and these are state DOTs that are building TSMO programs and coordinating across state boundaries. They all share the I-95 corridor. I-10 corridor is the same thing, going from Florida across to Arizona. You have an I-5 corridor on the West Coast that connects those cities. And so those corridors, along with some other alliances, corridor alliances, regional alliances across the country, I thought we could use a grant from this program to do a peer exchange and learn from these other entities about the possibilities and opportunities we have within the I-4 corridor. And if you look at the I-4 corridor going from Tampa all the way over to Daytona, it's kind of like, you know, the Vegas Strip kind of on steroids. It's a Carter of just events. There's events all across that Carter. They're happening all around the year. And because of that, that generates the traffic, it generates, you know, congestion, it generates incidents on and on. And TSMO strategies are appropriate for it. So that was the concept back in 2017. I met with representatives from the building program and, you know, talked to them about it. And at the time, they didn't think it was baked well enough. They offered some constructive criticism, and I appreciate that. And if it wasn't ready, it wasn't ready. So I said, okay, good. Let me just work on this a little bit more. So you know, I put it aside. The next year is when I was at this workshop and talked about our TSMO program, and I reimagined what it is we wanted to propose. So and just having some discussions between 2018 and 2019, you know, I developed this proposal for this regional I-4 regional TSMO program. And, you know, we talk with the MPOs, the directors at the MPOs, you know, in the I-4 Carter, Polk, TPO, River to Sea, Hillsborough. We even went into Fort Pinellas. And then there was the interest because of District 1, Sarasota Manatee MPO was interested in what we were doing, although they're not exactly in the I-4 Carter, but, you know, they're along that I-75 Carter, and the traffic from 75 feeds into I-4 and vice versa. And with them, it seemed logical to also include Pasco, which again is part of that Tampa Bay region that generates a lot of traffic going into I-4 and vice versa. And so we developed this proposal. We talked to them about it. And the whole idea was, again, to use some of my time to work with their staff and creating a more structured TSMO program at their MPOs. Not that they're lacking, but as we move further and further into the 21st century and technology takes more and more hold of the way mobility is defined, it just seemed appropriate. We're talking about a shared Carter that everyone start to develop TSMO strategies that will impact mobility and coordination across the Carter. And so that's what we've been doing, you know, in 2019. There's some other background work or work that was being done in the background that has moved this forward, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But this past year, you know, next, can you go back to the next slide? I mean, to the previous slide, please. Okay, 2020. The discussion has evolved this year. What we did is we wanted to take an opportunity to speak with the MPO Alliance that represents the MPOs in District 5. We wanted to speak with the coordinating committee council of MPOs that are in District 7, which is on the West Coast. And they both alliances share Polk County. They're split, but speak with them as well. And each year in the summer, they have a joint meeting where these two alliances come together and have a discussion. And so this year it was we call it a transportation summit. And we had these MPOs, TPOs come together and talk about TSMO and I-4 Carter. We had Deputy Secretary Drummond talk about TSMO from the Florida DOT perspective. And then we had the district secretaries from 1, 5, and 7 talk about TSMO. We had Ron Chin, who has received one of these ATC MTD grants for, it's called the I-4 Frame Project, similar to the project that we have, but it's looking at TSMO strategies, implementation of projects between in Polk County, Hillsborough County, and touching on the southern portion of our county or our planning area. And then I spoke about this concept of a corridor coalition or I-4 regional program, TSMO regional program. And we had some more discussion. We talked about, moving this forward. How do we move it forward? And so we did have a meeting, or we had a second meeting, a working group meeting to talk about Central Florida and TSMO, and to look at looking at developing some memorandum of understanding. So that's what took place, and I'll speak a little bit more about this summit in the next couple of slides. Next slide. So this regional summit that took place on July 10th to talk about TSMO and regional issues. Next slide. And so this graphic shows, as I would say, the original planning agencies that we had talked with. But at this summit, there was resolve to participate in this concept, to identify champions that would carry the word or carry this forward at their planning agencies. And while we look more at policy board members to serve as champions, because as I talk about our success, I always say that one of the secret ingredients in our secret sauce is the fact that we have leadership on our policy board that have served as our champions from the very beginning, beginning with Commissioner Ted Edwards with our Move It Yes You Can campaign. And then after that, we've had our current chair, Commissioner Delary, is a champion of TSMO. And then we've had our federal champions. Many of you that have been around long enough, and you may recall when Congressional Representative John Micah came, and this is before he had, came leave his seat in Congress to talk about ITS at one of our meetings. So we've had those champions in our region. And so when I speak with these NPOs and others, I always say, identify someone on your policy board that can be your champion, because that carries the ball down the field, so to speak. And then it was resolved to convene a second meeting. Next slide. So we transitioned from, at this summit meeting where we had the original planning agencies, and as a result of the discussion, River to Sea agreed to be part of this, as well as Space Coast. So as part of the discussion, we added 2 more planning agencies. Next slide. So we did, as part of the resolve, have a second meeting on August 21st, where we presented a memorandum of understanding amongst the agencies, or to the agencies. And the good thing about this MOU is we're not asking for any funds, or the resources we're asking for is just commitment from staff for us to work together, for us to if I need to meet with one of their staff members or get information from one of their staff members, that there's someone that's going to be that representative, and that I'm going to be committed to working with them and helping them as they change the structure of what they're doing within their agencies to advance TSMO, to build a culture within their agency that sees the opportunity that TSMO has for their agency. And it's not to copy exactly what we do, but to do something similar that fits their needs. Because as part of this discussion, for us, it may be incidents that we need to resolve quickly. For Pinellas, for them, it's more of evacuation and sustainability, and how can TSMO strategies help them. So everyone is different, but there is a sense of building some continuity across the corridor, across Central Florida. Agreed on a membership list, and then decision making. We developed this MOU. We wanted to get it in place so that we could move forward with, starting to put things in place. But But what would be required for them to move forward with this MOU? Did they need to get guidance or approval from their policy board to move forward with it? And some of the MPOs responded that, since we're not asking for anything other than just to participate and work together, that perhaps they can move it through their policy board on as a consent item with the executive directors actually executing the agreements. But it was, what do you need to do to move this forward, to get this executed? And so that's what we had the discussion on. The next item, the State Transportation Innovative Council grant, was an opportunity that we identified because one of the things that we recognize that if this is to become an entity, how do you sustain it? How do we continue to feed this, keep it moving? And so I mentioned earlier, some of the work we have been doing in the background for the last year was identifying some funding opportunities. And so we identified this State Transportation Innovation Council grant. And we submitted an application. Next slide. We submitted it, and it is to advance TSMO planning along the I-4 corridor. And we recognize that there's some operational and safety issues as a person, and many of you know that I live in Tampa, and so I spend a lot of time on I-4. And I know the back roads, I know the county roads that run parallel to I-4, so that when there's an incident or it's shut down, I don't follow ways. I don't need ways because I know where all the escape hatches are. But there's operational issues and safety issues that occur along I-4 that generate congestion, not only on I-4, but on the surface roads. And how can we, expand from I-4 to the surface roads with using TSMO strategies? There are some economic challenges as well as opportunities to work with the universities. We have three, I'd say, major universities in I-4 corridor: USF with Qatar. We have University of Central Florida, and then the Polytechnic University. And that's one opportunity. But there are a lot of technology companies coming to this area. I've had the discussion with some folks, and I said, if you think about California and you say, where's the technology, or the technology industry? Well, of course, it's Silicon Valley. And if you go and look at Texas and you say, well, where is it? And it's Austin. That's where all the technology companies are located. But if you ask that question of Florida, well, where is it? And for me, I would see it as being the Central Florida area, the I-4 corridor. And how do we leverage and invite some of that technology into the area, but take advantage of it? Because this technology is what's going into our TSMO strategies. And then the innovative opportunities that we have to showcase some of the strategies that we're advancing to improve mobility, well, change travel, improve mobility, but be innovative in how we do it, whether it's private-public partnerships, new opportunities with the universities to leverage some of the research that they're doing and have that pipeline that the research goes to demonstration, goes to implementation. University of Central Florida was awarded, and it's called the National Institute of Congestion Research grant. And so they're doing research on congestion and how to reduce congestion, how to mitigate the congestion impacts. And so how do we take some of that research and put it into the planning, realm, and then make that into a project? We, MetroPlan Orlando, in partnership with University of Central Florida and Florida DOT District 5, won a safety grant for the UCF to look at developing software that we can predict crashes and then respond to those crashes. So they're doing the research, but the end goal is that's going to help us develop some TSMO projects that improve safety. So the STIC grant that we were awarded was for $100,000, and it again is going to sustain us throughout. It's a 12-month grant, but it's going to sustain this effort, and it's going to allow us to seek other grant opportunities. You know, I spoke about the research grant that University of Central Florida, University of South Florida, Qatar has. You know, this is an opportunity for us to now have some discussion with them about how do we leverage some of that research funds so that we can develop some projects and strategies. Next slide. So next steps, the working group meeting, the second working group meeting that we were going to have was scheduled for October the 21st, but that meeting was postponed. Action on the MOUs. I mentioned some of the M/TPOs are starting to, or at least looking at having the MOU executed through or as a consent item on their board agendas. A couple of them have indicated that they have to work through the committees and then to the policy board. There's the item of governance. You know, how do this, if this is an entity, this is something that's sustainable. How does it function? And that is an item that needs to be discussed and taken care of. In addition to that, where does it end up? One of the compliments I received from a couple of the planners from the NPOs was, they were grateful that, we were taking this step. We were making MetroPlan Orlando was taking this step and making this effort to advance TSMO across Central Florida. And it means some of these planners, is not that they are not aware of TSMO, but they just haven't developed those skill sets. And when I say skill sets, I mean just, having the interaction with traffic engineers as we do, developing joint projects as we have with, the department as well as the university. So how do we, again, if it's something that's going to be sustained, how does it function and where does it go? So that's something to have some discussion on. Early on, I said it was, it's titled I-4 Regional TSMO Program. In some of the discussions, it's been, well, we're not just talking about I-4, are we? Because we have Space Coast, we have Sarasota Manatee, we have Fort Pinellas, which, is not really in I-4 ends in Tampa. Pinellas is 10, 15 miles away. And then we have Pasco, not necessarily an I-4 corridor. So should we change the name to Mid-Florida or Central Florida Corridor Coalition? That is part of the discussion again. We do have, again, as part of this work in this group effort, we've involved the districts. And one of the districts that is being affected or part of it is the Turnpike. So we do have a representative from the Turnpike that's working with this group. But it was suggested that we invite or ask Central Florida Expressway in the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority to be part of this discussion. Again, it's just a question mark. It's something that was suggested. It's something that needs to be, again, looked at and may have the discussion with these authorities. And then lastly, Qatar. Again, I mentioned that they have a research grant that's focused on congestion, and as part of the discussion of this entity, where does it land, how is it hosted, how is it sustained? And so one of the opportunities is for it to be something that is sustained through Qatar. And full disclosure, I'm a former Qatar employee. I was a Qatar employee before I became a MetroPlan Orlando employee, but I'm familiar with their activities, the way that they work, and I know that they have done this type of hosting of a concept, a research or entity in the past where something has been started. And in order for it to continue, Qatar is structured so that they can host it and facilitate it, because there's some administrative work that needs to be done in the background to sustain something like this. So these are the next steps. It's been an interesting effort so far. I shared with you how it started in 2017 with just a notion, and how it has gotten to this point. And it's been a little bit challenging because in working with the MPOs, like us, many of them were working this past year on updating their long range plan. So, to think about something like this is low on the priority. So, we've gotten this far, and I'm sure that we will be able to move this a little bit farther along. Next slide. I believe this is the last one. Yes, thanks. So, Mr. Chairman, that is all that I have to present on this subject, and open to comments or questions.
Any questions from the group? Please use your raised hands. Eric, I'm assuming this has been well received through the others. How do you ensure that everybody stays equally engaged, and this isn't a smaller TPOs or MPOs sitting back and watching what you do?
Right. That's part of the MOU, is to make sure that there's a staff person that is assigned to work with me and the other MPOs as things develop. Part of what we have to do is part of the next steps is to define, what are, if you will, deliverables, what are the goals, objectives that we want to achieve, and how that's measured. And part of that, again, is, looking at what we can do as a group. And in addition to that, I mentioned sustainability. How's this sustained? Because there are grant opportunities that sustain these types of entities around the country. And again, one of the initial concepts for this was a peer exchange. And I see that as a great opportunity because, again, I've had some discussions with representatives from these organizations, and they acknowledge it. They see it as a great opportunity, and are willing to share lessons learned because they've gone through it, and now continuing and are willing to share some of their information. A colleague of mine who's with Federal Highway Administration, I had a discussion because I'm on a project, FHWA project, as an advisor to the project, and just sharing with them what we're doing, because the project is titled Mainstreaming TSMO. How do we mainstream TSMO? And the response was, that sounds like a great living laboratory. And in a sense it is. How do we, again, look at not only coordinating and collaborating on TSMO strategies within a region, but across a corridor, is something that's innovative, it's unique, and especially from when you have the MPOs doing this, as opposed to the actual, transportation agencies. And again, this is not for project implementation. This is for planning, developing strategies that can be tested maybe, but looked at and then turned into projects if that is the case. Because again, the research we're doing with UCF on safety, part of that is, doing the research, testing, and then how does that become a project that, comes into our TIP and is then implemented.
We have a chat comment from Butch saying, awesome, Eric. And I would have to echo that. I really like this effort. It's much easier in the future to work together when you have a history, then something comes up that's time sensitive, and you're trying to cross boundaries and make those arrangements. So I applaud you, Eric. I don't see any other raised hands.
Well, Brian has his hand up. Brian's hand
Okay,
up.
I don't see that. Brian, you are recognized.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the mention and reference to the Central Florida Expressway Authority. Obviously, I-4 corridor is now one of our roadways, but definitely key interchange, I-4 and 408. And there's several interchanges within the region that impact our roadways. So certainly I appreciate the opportunity to conversation. So that's something we could follow up with in terms of how we can potentially become engaged. That'd be great.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I see Brian Sanders has his hand up.
I don't
Sanders.
believe I
Oh, it's not your hand?
do.
Okay.
That's me, Hazan Al-Assar.
Oh.
Them,
Oh, okay.
you're recognized.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for Eric for moving this effort forward. I definitely support that, and I just wanted to point out that we're already working with DOT and other agencies on the I-4 frame project, and this is a grant that was led by the central office. And we're definitely happy to see that as a first step in advancing a coalition for the I-4 corridor.
Thank you, Hazem. And as I mentioned earlier, it has been a little challenging. And one of the things through this experience so far for me, I really appreciated is that phrase, herding cats. Couldn't really identify with that phrase for many years because I don't have any cats. But this seems like it fits that description because again, there's 5 to 7 planning agencies, and then there are 3 districts, and then there's the local jurisdictions, right? They're part of this. They're affected by this. So just coordinating time and speaking with, my counterparts, has been a little bit of a challenge. So again, that speaks to that governance and structure, putting that together so that everyone is coordinated and on the same page, and we have some structure in how we move this forward. So that's again a important piece.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands. All right, thank you, Eric.
Sure.
So you will notice in your agenda that we also have a discussion item. So we'll ask you to raise your hands to be recognized if you have a question. On our second speaker is Mr. Hill from MetroPlan Orlando again. So
Okay.
This will be a discussion on the Workforce Development Initiative to address some of our technical skills and human resource needs in the transportation industry. Mr. Hill.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And this again is the discussion. I wanted to bring it up to TSMO because this is an area that, and many of you have been part of the TSMO consortium and are aware of the shortage that we have in this more signal technicians in our industry. But in just following up and again, coordinating and working with my peers across the country, I'm hearing it from other areas as well, that, there's a shortage of technical paraprofessionals in our industry because the skill sets are now more marketable. And so individuals that have the skill sets or interest are not aware of the opportunities in transportation. That's one thing. The other thing is just addressing the absence of individuals that are coming into the industry. And what we at MetroPlan Orlando, we want to do is, as part of our UPWP, part of one of our tasks in UPWP is we want to do what we can do to help build the capacity back in terms of employment and employment opportunities in our industry. So again, this is a discussion item. It's one of the things that we as staff are doing and working on. And so the concept, or what I'm presenting here, is a task force, and the objective would be to engage educational and technical institutions and high schools to address the workforce shortage in transportation, increase awareness of transportation careers. This task force would help us develop appropriate mechanisms for outreach effort that will result in a network of training opportunities for paraprofessionals and field operations at educational facilities in Orlando area. And these may include high schools, the STEM programs, as well as technical schools, community college, UCF, and workforce centers. Now, bringing in new workers into our industry or engaging the youth is one of our board policy emphasis areas. And our public involvement program has always done a lot with going to schools as part of their outreach and speaking to students about what we do at MetroPlan Orlando in transportation in general. And again, I mentioned that there is a shortage of these skill sets in our industry, and that's something that District 5 has talked again amongst the TSMO consortium. And just some of the things that staff has been doing over the years with this is back in 2008, MetroPlan Orlando served in a liaison role for driver education pilot program at Lyman High School and Winter Springs High School. So working with high schools, speaking to youth about issues in transportation, we've already done some of that. And again, driver training was one of the early efforts that we had. Every year, I'm part of an organization that's called the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. And every year, we have what's called the Garrett Morgan Shadow Day. And it's a day that we go and we select a high school and we invite students to a transportation facility to tell them about or to explain to them transportation and what it involves in the careers that they have. And every year, I always suggest to our committee that there's an opportunity for us to share what we do through the Great American Teach-In. And that's coming up next month. And that's an opportunity again for us to go into schools, speak to students about what we do and the opportunities that they have. I serve on a STEM advisory board here in Tampa at one of the high schools, Middleton High School. And the students themselves are always challenged with problem statements and applying the skills that they're learning to answer those problems. And so my effort has been, if there's something dealing with transportation or safety or, how can it relate to, improving transportation? So there's an opportunity for us as staff individuals to go into high schools and work with them. And then Laura Balk and I have been working with the USDOT Professional Capacity Building Program at the Volpe Center. And they are developing materials that can be used as lesson plans in high schools and in STEM programs in particular. So staff has been doing work in this area and working with students, the high schools, but also with training centers, workforce centers, the universities and the colleges. But we want to expand that. We want to do more and have more of an impact in that area. Again, to not only take care of or help training opportunities for seasoned employees, but for those that are considering careers in our industry, and to take care or address some of the shortages that we have. And then lastly, let me just close with, just my own personal experience that, I fell into this career by mistake. It was, someone came to me and said, New Jersey Transit is hiring. And I said, I don't want to be a bus driver. And they said, well, there's a schedule that the bus has to follow. And I said, well, yeah, that makes sense. And that's how I fell into the industry. I was hired as a schedule writer and moved on from there. And, when I now speak with people about what I do, sometimes I get a whimsical look like, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, that road, it wasn't always there, and it just didn't get there. It just didn't show up. Someone had to plan it, someone had to design it, and then someone had to build it. And then the conversation goes on. Oh, really? How do I get involved with that? And then next, there's a lot of discussion and awareness now of equity in certain communities and for a lot of communities. And this is an opportunity for us to address some of those equity issues, because it's not always about the resources that are provided to certain communities, but the opportunities and access to those opportunities. And this is an opportunity for us to have an impact on someone's life. It could change a whole generation of a family, for making them aware of the opportunities that we have or that are available in this industry. Because again, it's not something that most people are aware of. But then when you start to have the conversation with them, as I've had with high school students and other individuals, then they understand it. So, Mr. Chairman, again, this is just a discussion. Again, I'm asking if there's interest in assembling a task force to help staff with just developing the mechanism for doing something like this, and then moving on from there. And it would be something that we as a committee could practice, that is consistent, so that we all have the same message, the same tools to work with, in going out and working with groups, working with the community, schools, and then again, helping our industry, bringing in the needed resources in our industry. So, Mr. Chairman, let me stop and ask if you can go ahead and help with facilitating the discussion at this time.
I see a hand from Brian. You're recognized. Brian Hermione.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, Eric, I like the idea a lot about forming a task force for this. I mean, it's definitely one of those initiatives that really meaningful. Not only helps the industry, but helps the region in general. I think it's a great idea. You spoke of some of the things that MetroPlan has done in the past. PFX has also been engaged in these types of activities. Actually, several years ago, started a program with Lyman High School where reached out to their magnet engineering program, and the timing actually worked out really well. Through coordination with one of our consultant firms as well as our PIO, we were able to kind of provide series of presentations, but also field trips while we were designing and constructing the Wekiva Parkway, which, as you all know, is an immense project with a number of engineering concepts and that were included in there. So that was a great opportunity to engage one of the local high schools, which we effectively did for several years. And again, it was really neat because it afforded the opportunity to bring the kids out to the site as the structures were being constructed, as the roadway was being constructed, and really walk through and show them the whole process from design to construction. Another avenue we've gone as an agency is we've actually also have an agreement with the University of Central Florida to provide interns. So it's not specific transportation. They do actually feed our IT group, but we actually do contract with them to have interns at our agency. So that's another way of engaging students and kind of showing them different avenues, different facets of the transportation industry, and getting them engaged at an earlier age. So I love the idea. I think the idea of a task force is a good one, and I'm just here to support.
Thanks.
Azim, I see your hand is up. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also wanted to bring up the discussion we had at the TSMO consortium a couple of years ago on the same topic. It was, we actually had several presentations from DOT and also Mid-Florida Tech. Uh, and the outcome of that discussion was to have a program for dual enrollment for high school students at Mid-Florida Tech. And I haven't really heard anything about that discussion since then. So I don't know if Eric heard anything about that.
No, I'm not aware of anything gone beyond. I have not heard of anything regarding that. I do recall when at Florida at the TSMO consortium meeting a couple years ago, where we wanted to develop something at, or I think it was Orlando Tech or Orange County Tech, Orlando Tech. I'm not sure the name of the school.
Mid-Florida Tech.
Is it okay? And we had identified, and I think Jeremy had taken the lead on this, and he had identified, I think, 20 students that they would go ahead and develop a curriculum for. And at the same time, Blue Horizon came and also presented something similar to them, but they had like, I think, 1,000 students. And because they had more students than our proposal had, they went ahead and allocated the resources towards Blue Horizon to meet Blue Horizon's request. And it is the result of that, in part, that we, MetroPlan Orlando, started this concept or this idea, because we did have a discussion with the department, and one of the things that they saw as an opportunity for MetroPlan Orlando to help them with is developing something of a workforce development program. And again, it's right now we've done, as I mentioned, we've done some work in this area, but it hasn't been really structured. And what we're requesting is, number one, just your participation in this in a structured way.
I only wanted to make sure that we're building on the efforts that have already been started, and we're not restarting from scratch, because we would be wasting our time if we continue doing that. So if you can reach out to Jeremy and see if he has any update on that effort that he started 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Brett Blackadar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, a very good idea, and I certainly would be willing to participate if you put together a committee. Altamont Springs currently has 2 different partnerships with Seminole County schools. One is their Altamont Springs Science Incubator, and then we just had a project H2O. They're both environmental engineering programs, but I think we could use some of those experiences, to look at transportation. We've certainly been talking about that. Just as an example, our project H2O partnered with Lake Brantley High School, and this last school year we had, I think, 8 kids that actually came after school to our wastewater treatment plant and got the education enough to get their operator's license so that they could be placed in jobs. I think everyone that wanted a job was placed in a local government afterwards, because that's another industry that has a big shortage, treatment plant operator. So just as an example, but certainly a great idea. And I think just listening to other people here sharing, I think we probably have a lot of ideas across the committee and things that are already being done that we can work together on.
Okay, thanks.
Eric, if this is an emphasis area of the board, how do we communicate back that things are in fact happening?
It would be part of Gary Hutman's report out to the board. That would be the most direct way. But in addition to that, going forward from this point, since our next meeting is a meeting where we won't take action, the formation of a task force would be an action item. But it gives us staff an opportunity to put something before you that is something you can take action on, and not just have a discussion and move forward, but for us to come back to you and suggest this is what these are some of the steps we want to take and have the task force members make better sense or refine that. And a task force, has a sunrise and a sunset. So this wouldn't be something that would be ongoing. It would be a opportunity for us again to give some structure to it, refine it, and then go forward and do what we can with it.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Eric? Not seeing any raised hands. I think that's a good thing for us to come back and have a little further discussion. All right, we do have common presentations with the TAC meeting. You will see those in your agenda. You will need to disconnect and then sign into the TAC meeting for those presentations. If you're a member of TAC, you can go in through the link in the panelist invitation via your email. If you're not a member, then please join the meeting through the public link at metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. You will also see several items under the general information at tab 4 in your agenda. For our upcoming meetings, as we previously mentioned, our next TSMO meeting will be December the 4th, since we will not have a scheduled meeting in November. As we have also heard, this will be a virtual workshop so that quorum will not be required. If this changes, we will be notified by MetroPlan Orlando staff. The next MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be November the 18th, and it will be a hybrid meeting with some board members, staff, and members of the public attending in person, and other board members, staff, members of the public, and the presenters will be attending virtually on Zoom. There is a 2045 MTP working group meeting, which will be virtual and is coming up on November the 3rd. Are there any committee members who have final comments? Please use raise your hands function. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. We now move on to our public comments. If any members of the public wish to comment, please use raise hands function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We will unmute your mic. After you're recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes or less. I do have a hand up from Pam Richmond, so Pam, I will recognize you.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell y'all that this will be my last meeting with TSMO as the voting member. I'm giving my seat up for someone much more qualified than myself. We have a new public services director. His name is Jeff Weatherford. He comes to us from the city of Houston, where he was the director of transportation and oversaw about $1 billion annual budget. He is a PTOE, but he is also an ITS expert. And so I think what he will bring to this committee is way more than I could ever share. And so for the good of the committee and for the city, I'm going to let him be the voting member and I'll participate as the alternate.
Thank you, Pam. We're glad that you're staying with us as alternate, and you're always welcome. Any public comments out there? Mr. Hill, were there any written or phone comments submitted before the meeting?
No, there are not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I'm not seeing hands raised. So I'd like to thank you, everybody, for joining us. At this time, with no further business, we stand adjourned.